In a small, forgotten town nestled between towering mountains and dense forests, there lived a figure cloaked in mystery. Her name was Lyra, but the townsfolk referred to her as the Silent One. Lyra had a presence that commanded attention, even in her silence. She moved through the streets with an air of confidence, her long, flowing cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. People turned their heads when she passed, whispers following in her wake, filled with both fear and fascination. Lyra had always been different. From a young age, she possessed an uncanny ability to evoke strong emotions in those around her without uttering a single word. Her gaze could pierce through the bravest hearts, and her mere presence could silence a crowded room. It was as if she carried an energy that resonated with the deepest fears and desires of those who encountered her. The townsfolk, wary of the unknown, often spoke of her in hushed tones, sharing tales of her supposed powers. As the years went by, Lyra became a figure of both reverence and dread. Some believed she was a witch, others thought she was cursed, but all agreed that there was something extraordinary about her. Children dared each other to approach her, only to run away in terror when she turned her piercing gaze upon them. Adults avoided her, crossing the street to escape her presence, convinced that she brought misfortune with her. Yet, Lyra was not a malevolent force. She was simply a woman who had learned to navigate a world that often dismissed the power of silence. In her solitude, she discovered the strength that lay in her ability to connect with the world without words. She spent her days wandering the forests, finding solace among the trees and the whispers of the wind. Nature became her confidant, a sanctuary where she could explore her thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. One fateful evening, as twilight descended upon the town, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling ominously overhead. The winds howled, and the rain fell in torrents, drowning out the sounds of the world. As the townsfolk huddled in their homes, fear gripped their hearts. It was on this night that Lyra chose to venture out, drawn by an inexplicable force that beckoned her to the heart of the storm. As she stepped into the rain, the air crackled with energy. Lyra felt the power coursing through her veins, a connection to the elements that she had never fully understood. She raised her arms to the sky, feeling the raindrops dance upon her skin. And in that moment, she became a conduit for the storms. Fury, lightning flashed, illuminating her figure, and the townsfolk peered out from their windows, their eyes wide with terror. They watched as she stood amidst the chaos, a solitary figure against the raging storm. The winds howled louder, and the thunder boomed, but Lyra remained unfazed, her presence unwavering. It was as if the storm itself recognized her power, bending to her will. The townsfolk, paralyzed by fear, could only watch as she commanded the elements without uttering a single word. In the midst of the tempest, Lyra felt a shift within her. She understood that her silence was not a weakness, but a strength. It allowed her to connect with the world in ways that words could never achieve. The storm was a reflection of her own inner turmoil, a manifestation of the fears she had carried for so long. As she embraced the chaos, she felt a sense of liberation wash over her. With every flash of lightning, she unleashed her emotions, channeling her pain, anger, and sorrow into the storm. The townsfolk, witnessing this extraordinary display, began to feel the weight of their own fears. They realized that they had projected their insecurities onto Lyra, allowing their imaginations to run wild. In their silence, they had created a monster out of a woman who simply sought to exist. As the storm raged on, Lyra's presence transformed the atmosphere. The townsfolk could feel the energy shift, the fear that had once gripped them now replaced by a strange sense of awe. They saw her not as a threat, but as a powerful force of nature and embodiment of their own struggles and triumphs. They began to understand that her silence spoke volumes, conveying emotions that words could never express. Suddenly, the storm began to subside, and Lyra felt a calm wash over her. The winds calmed, and the rain turned to a gentle drizzle. The townsfolk emerged from their homes, their fear replaced by curiosity. They approached her cautiously, unsure of how to bridge the gap that had long separated them. Lyra stood before them, her eyes reflecting the remnants of the storm. She did not need to speak. Her presence alone conveyed the message. She was not the monster they had imagined, but a woman who had faced her own demons and emerged stronger. Slowly, the townsfolk began to understand the power of silence, the strength that lay in vulnerability. As they gathered around her, Lyra noticed the expressions on their faces: fear, curiosity, and something else, a longing for connection. They had lived in a world where words often failed to convey their true feelings, where silence was misconstrued as weakness. But now, in the aftermath of the storm, they were beginning to see the beauty in Lyra's quiet strength. One brave soul stepped forward, a young woman named Mira, who had always been fascinated by Lyra, but too afraid to approach her. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. Lyra met Mira's gaze, her eyes softening. She understood that the question was not just about her. It was about the townsfolk's fear of the unknown. Without uttering a word, Lyra extended her hand, inviting Mira to join her. The gesture spoke volumes, bridging the gap that had long separated them. Myra hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, taking Lyra's hand. In that simple act, something shifted in the atmosphere. The townsfolk watched in awe as Lyra and Myra stood together, two women connected by a shared understanding that transcended words. It was a moment of vulnerability, of acceptance, and the townsfolk began to feel the stirrings of their own courage. One by one, others stepped forward, drawn by the magnetic pull of Lyra's presence. They reached out, forming a circle around her, each person seeking to connect without the barriers of fear and misunderstanding. Lyra felt the energy of the group shift, a collective heartbeat that resonated with the power of their shared humanity. In that circle, Lyra began to convey her emotions through gestures and expressions, allowing her silence to speak for her. She pointed to the sky, illustrating the storm that had just passed, and then to her heart, conveying the struggles she had faced. The townsfolk watched, captivated by her ability to communicate without words, feeling the weight of their own burdens lift as they connected with her. As the night wore on, Lyra became a beacon of hope for the townsfolk. They shared their stories, their fears, and their dreams, finding solace in the understanding that they were not alone. In the absence of words, they discovered a new language, one of empathy, compassion, and connection. Lyra's presence transformed the town. No longer a figure shrouded in fear, she became a symbol of strength and resilience. The townsfolk learned to embrace their own silences, finding power in the moments of stillness that allowed them to connect with themselves and each other. They began to understand that it was okay to be vulnerable, to express their emotions without fear of judgment. As the seasons changed, so did the town. The once quiet streets buzzed with life, laughter, and creativity. The townsfolk organized gatherings where they shared their art, music, and stories, celebrating the beauty of their differences. Lyra became an integral part of these events, her silent presence a reminder of the strength that lay within each of them. One day, as the sun set over the mountains, casting a warm glow over the town, Lyra stood at the edge of the forest, watching the festivities unfold. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had helped transform the fear that had once defined her existence into a source of strength for others. The townsfolk had learned to embrace their own monsters, finding power in their vulnerabilities. But, as with all stories, challenges lay ahead. A new threat emerged. A neighboring town, fearful of the changes in Lyra's town, began to spread rumors about her. They painted her as a witch, a harbinger of chaos, and their fear quickly spread like wildfire. The once unified town found itself divided, with some succumbing to the fear that had once plagued them. Lyra sensed the shift in the atmosphere. The whispers grew louder, and the townsfolk began to retreat into their homes, fearing the consequences of their connection